All right. Welcome to the Ultra High Net Worth Clients Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Broadhead. We started this podcast as a way to create a central resource of the best financial advisor practice growing tips shared by the most outstanding advisors in the industry, of which our guest today is definitely one. These outstanding financial advisors agree to be on the show and provide a ton of value for free, all in the hopes that our audience might learn from their words. My father was a financial advisor, and financial advisors are the main clients we serve. So, my marketing agency's mission is to help every financial advisor grow their business in an effort to help the world become more financially secure. Today, we have the rare pleasure of talking with an incredible financial advisor, Paul Stack. Paul, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Certainly can. Thank you, Chris, for having me on. I appreciate it. I
Absolutely.
came to becoming a financial advisor a little bit later in life, although I did start off long time ago in a financial advising practice. When I right got out of undergrad back in the 80s, I worked for a firm, and essentially I was behind a computer. When I was 22 years old, they didn't think I was the right person to be in front of clients, which I agree. And I, I learned a great deal. Particularly, I learned how to do taxes, and I understood about investments, and that was key. But I certainly did not like not talking to clients. So I went to become a classroom teacher at that point, and I taught economics and personal finance for over 30 years. But then my 50-something self apparently was to be trusted with clients. So that's when I said, okay, let's become a financial advisor. So I retired from the classroom, and now I work with Ameriprise. This is certainly very similar to what I did as a teacher, in the sense that much of what I need to do is help my client understand what are the options, what are the pros and cons.
Mhm.
How do we think about risk? How do we think about performance of a given investment? How do we put an entire portfolio together? And most importantly, what's all this money for? What are we going to do with it? Because
Mhm.
that's the key. That's always the starting point: is what are the goals, and how do we think about our wealth in terms of those goals?
Hmm. Okay. That's interesting. So you went to school for finance, what
Economics was my major in
economics?
undergrad.
Okay, got it. So then your plan was to become a financial advisor after school, and then you decided to go the teaching route instead, or how did that come about?
Well, but the essence was I liked what I did for about 6 months, maybe a year, because being behind a computer at 22 years old is just not a thrill. It was okay, but I didn't go. I didn't think about my career in terms of what could I do with a spreadsheet, because that was what I was really good at, and it was an opportunity to learn a great deal in that regard. It just wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. So that's when I said, let's become a classroom teacher so I can get in front of people and I don't have to wait so long. Because that was kind of the path of being a financial advisor when you're in your 20s. Getting in front of clients often takes several years. So that's why I went the route of becoming a classroom teacher.
Okay, that's awesome. So then you're a classroom teacher. You said for 30 years,
Yep.
and then what inspired you to uh, pivot to becoming or going to become a financial advisor again?
Well, several things I learned when I was in that first job in the financial advising firm was I learned how to do taxes. So I started to, for family and friends, do tax returns. And I didn't do a ton, maybe 30 or so year by year. This was over 35 years ago. In addition to that, I gave away financial advice the teachers who were in the room next door, down the hall, and then, several people would come ask me questions. And I said, well, why are you asking me? And they said, my other colleagues had said, hey, Stack, that guy, he knows stuff. So after a while, I said, I probably should stop giving away this advice.
Yeah.
Really can make a living at this.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things about the teacher pension was that it gave me an opportunity to make a transition in my 50s where I didn't have to make a full salary right away. So that opportunity was very helpful in making the switch.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's great. So, we've actually had a number of guests who were teachers and then transitioned to becoming a financial advisor, and that seems to be quite an effective and successful route. How has a career in teaching positively impacted your ability to offer and deliver exceptional financial advisory services?
There are two primary skills that every teacher learns. Well, I don't know about all the teachers I was aware of, including myself. One is listening.
Mhm,
When you're in the classroom, you have multiple voices and you've got to be able to work through them. Now, the fortunate thing about being an advisor is that I, generally speaking, have one or two voices in the room in addition to my own instead of 25 or 30. So
mm,
it certainly helps that it's actually easier in many respects to listen well. But that's the key. You've got to listen well because
mm,
many times people who are trying to explain what they want out of their wealth, they're not even sure themselves. And I can understand that. I ask my own self with my personal wealth, what is this for? And I sometimes change my mind on various goals. So I can certainly understand. And that's the key to listening is what are they not saying? What are the, reading in between the lines, so to speak? What
mhm,
are the things that I ought to be asking to help draw some more clarity to this conversation? So there's the key. You gotta listen. And then the second thing is what I just alluded to, asking good questions. That is so impactful, primarily because if you don't ask enough questions or the right questions, but not too many questions, you're going to be left with holes in making a financial plan. You've got to figure out how not to overwhelm, but also to elicit the kind of detail that really is going to lead in the direction. And sometimes that's an open question. Sometimes it's a very focused question. I was working with a client not too long ago, and this person was indicating to me that they're pretty conservative. They don't want to lose money. And the next question was, okay, then you're okay with a long-term earnings rate of, let's say 3 or 4% after taxes. Oh, wait. Oh, no, that's too low. Okay. Okay. All right. Now that's clarity. Let's talk a little bit more about what kind of rate of return you're hoping for or anticipating or thinking is reasonable and what is that time frame, and then maybe we're going to get to the point of saying I probably am wanting to take a little more risk than I indicated previously in the conversation. So those are the kind of clarifying questions that one has to ask. I did ask a client about what they want with this money. Are they really planning to travel more? And sometimes clients say, well, I don't know, because here I am at, let's say, 59 or 62 or 71, whatever the age, it often changes what they want to do. And many times they thought they wanted to leave their children some money. And then as their children got older, they had some second thoughts. And maybe they wanted to give something to charity instead, or at least some part of it. So this is where asking questions and then understanding what kind of follow-ups are needed to get to a place of understanding can really be useful.
Hmm. That's great. I love that 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 trick. I don't want to call it a trick, but that strategy of kind of, holding up a mirror to what they're asking for, and then here's the here's what will be delivered. And they're like, oh gosh, that's not enough.
Yeah, right.
That's great. So, I mean, obviously, like, listening to your client will come up with the appropriate questions that you need to ask to ensure that you are delivering what they're looking for. But are there any other kind of standard or strategic questions that you include in, your onboarding or general kind of servicing of clients to ensure that, you are both on the same page, and you're hearing everything that they're saying, and they're hearing everything that you're saying?
In order to answer that question, let me focus on a couple different types of clients. So
Sure.
one client I have is relatively young. He's in his later 20s and he's come into income recently. He grew up, you know, okay. They certainly were making ends meet mostly, but certainly there wasn't left over, and there was some struggle. And now he's got significant six figures, and he's not sure what to do with it. So he's put it all in a savings account in the bank. And I said, okay, but how is this going to get to some of the goals that we had talked about in a previous conversation about starting a business, having enough to maybe purchase a property, and those sorts of impacts? And they said, the big thing here is what you want me to do, if I understand your explanation of goals correctly, is you want me to grow this wealth in a significant fashion based on what's possible. What are some of the investment streams that are going to make this not grow by 3 or 4% a year, but by 15 or 16, 17, 18% a year? Yes, we're going to take a higher level of risk to get to those types of rewards, but we can do that in a reasonable fashion in a relatively short time frame, 5 years, and not generally be worried about a significant market downturn. He had no experience with this kind of thing,
Mhm,
not with his family
mhm,
growing up and not personally. So that took some significant development. It's an education, and that's what I'm good at. And that, I think, is particularly why teachers can be very successful in this business, because we have a knack for taking a person where their understanding is at the moment and saying, okay, I've got to expand on that. I've got to get them to this next place where they can grasp. Uh, and again, the grasping is where they really want to be.
Mhm. Are there key questions or specific strategies you employ to understand exactly where the client's understanding is?
Mostly it's asking about their behavior.
Mhm.
People often can say that they believe many different things, but they don't often act that way. So uh, the 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 question is, so again, if I have a client, for example, I had a client who was in their mid 60s, and they had been investing in their workplace 403b. And I said, you have chosen this particular investment, and it was really low earning. I said, what was the rationale for that? And they're like, I don't know. I, I signed up for this thing, and they said to me, here's where you can put your money. And I said, okay, okay. All right. So we know that you were not really knowledgeable about the various options, and you didn't have anybody who was going to talk to you about what is possible and what are some of the different types of returns, and what are their attendant risk levels as you were getting into this. And I can certainly do that. So there's, why did you do a certain thing is a general question that I practically always am getting at. And many times there's follow up there. Oh, you chose this thing 15 years ago. Do you still think that that's what you are hoping for? And has it behaved? Has this resulted, this choice you made, in what you expected and what you want going forward? So a lot of my questions will ask about their previous decisions, previous behavior.
Mhm. Eh, awesome. Um, yeah, that's I love that kinda question-based, framework, like, you're not really telling them directly, like, "Hey, that's you're only gonna get 2 or 3% return per year like that. You sure that's enough?" You're you're, uh, you're asking questions so they come to the realization themselves like an exceptional teacher would.
Right. I'm not trying to make a presentation or make a pitch. What I'm trying to do is ask enough questions so that I understand what they really want to know. Because many times people will start off, and I can say, do you have any questions for me to begin with? And they'll often say, no, not really. So it requires me to ask some questions that really get at where are they hoping to be. And an advisor that I work with asks a very important question to my mind. And the question is, after we've been working together for 1 year, where do you want to be? What is your hope for the end of this year that we're going to be working together? How about if we work together for 3 years? What would be an indicator that this worked for you?
Mhm. That's a good question. Yeah. Awesome, awesome. Before I move on to the next, topic, any other, great questions that, any of our listeners who are advisors or aspiring advisors could incorporate into their, client meetings?
One question I often ask is, what do you know about what the stock market is? And what is a stock? What do you know about what other types of investment are?
Mhm,
And, sometimes I have to ask it carefully because I certainly don't want to insult the client and say, you can tell me if you don't know anything. Uh, I, I'm trying to elicit where their current understanding is. For many of my clients, they keep a great deal of money in the bank in
mhm,
certificates of deposit. And
mm,
I ask, what what is the rationale for that? And many times they'll say to me that you have the insurance, FDIC insurance. Okay. There are other types of insurance for various securities, for example. Um, and they're like, I never even heard of that. Uh,
Mhm.
so there are questions that I ask about what are the different types of investments and what do they already understand about these. Particularly when I have younger clients, and I experienced this a lot when I was a classroom teacher teaching 17-year-olds about personal finance. I went with them through investment scenarios. And I said, let's just go online and look at some mutual funds. And they would say to me, oh, this is a stock market fund. I heard the stock market is like playing roulette. And I say, well, here's the big difference. The roulette table doesn't produce anything. There's
Mhm.
no,
Mhm.
no business there. So yes, you're right in the sense that the roulette table is red and black and numbers, and you can say that's the same thing as investing in stocks, except it's not. And you can look at the returns in the stock market over time. And yes, you have ups and downs, and you can think of those as gambling. I prefer to think of it as people who are trying to figure it out. In economics, we always talk about you're trying to get the prices right. And that's how markets work. So therefore, naturally, people are going to have rising prices and falling prices because they're searching. They're trying to get the prices right. Well, over the significant period of time, the stock market has not lost money. If you're investing for 10, 15, 20 years, you have seen an increase, a significant one.
Mhm.
And that's not because people were continuously gambling and it just worked out for them. So I
Yeah.
often will say there's education here, and I've got to help people see what investing is going to bring them and why it works, as opposed to the thought that I just hope I get lucky.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good, distinction, really good explanation of the distinction there. Awesome. So, some previous guests, also transitioned from different careers, and they seemed to kind of foundationally build their practice off of previous colleagues and kind of folks from a similar background. Did you find yourself focusing on any specific niches like teachers or public servants or anything like that? Or what sort of niches did if any did you find yourself serving most?
The firm that I joined already had some clients that they wanted me to service. So that
Hmm.
is essentially how I got started. Yes, I've certainly worked with a number of teachers, not just in my own school district, but in others as well. But that really hasn't been the vast majority of my clients. In fact, I don't have the majority of my clients in any particular industry. So I understand
Hmm.
your point. I certainly anticipated when I got into financial advising that I would primarily work with people who were either in the classroom uh, or some or circumstance connected to education. But quite honestly, it hasn't worked out that way. Many of my clients I've gotten from other advisors, and I have had several from my tax practice. So over the last couple of years that I retired from teaching, I now had more opportunity to take on more tax clients. So I've done that. I've probably quadrupled my tax practice. And one of the great things about being both a tax advisor and a financial advisor, when the financial advisor in me says, you really got to ask your tax advisor for it because I can't do that. And then I had regular conversations with their tax advisor in my own head. So that connection has worked out well.
Hey, would you say that is a big advantage and leg up over traditional advisors to also be a CPA tax advisor?
It's a good question. I don't know that it is because I certainly know plenty of financial advisors who know a great deal, because you have to, about tax law. Being in the business of taxes, I suppose, is an advantage. I certainly find it an advantage. Um, and certainly I never want to turn away some financial advisors' ability to do the work. If they're not a tax advisor, I certainly think that they have all those great abilities. And sometimes they're the ones who are telling the client the question to ask of their CPA. And there's a lot of understanding, even if they're limited and they don't want to put themselves out there as someone giving tax advice because, again, they don't have the requisite qualifications. But I certainly think that in my case, it's been very helpful to have both my tax practice and my financial planning practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've had a couple guests who also have tax practices as well, and it does, from my perspective, it seems beneficial to have both tax and finance um, uh, understanding. Um, have you found that a lot of or most of your new clients are tax clients first and then become advisory clients?
Not necessarily.
No.
Sometimes it goes the other way. I've had
Okay.
advising clients who then become tax clients. Uh, could I say that there's been one trend, one direction or the other? No, probably been about 50-50.
Oh, cool. Nice. Well, that's just a wider net with which to catch good clients. Sounds like.
But for the most part, these are two needs that people have. So it's rare to find people who have significant wealth who also want to do their own taxes. Now occasionally that happens. I
Mhm.
know that. And he was making, California person in tech, he was making $1 million a year.
Oh wow.
And he was using TurboTax to do his taxes. Said, you mean like all on your own? You're just doing this. And he had complicated things. Yep. Okay. All right. That's unusual, I think, but I gotcha. That's it.
Yeah. Hey, man. You don't become a millionaire by spending more than what is it, like
Yeah. Yeah.
120
He was
bucks on
definitely
TurboTax?
right. Right. And he said, oh, those CPAs, they want like thousands of dollars to do my taxes. I can do it on TurboTax for a couple $100. Okay.
Hey, more power to you. That's interesting. So, how do you find clients? How did you get traction when you first started? How did you uh, get momentum? How do you find clients today?
There are a number of ways. I certainly have an online presence. Um, it's easier to have online uh, tax advertising than it is finance advertising. There are more rules about
Mhm.
advertising yourself in the financial realm. Uh, and then, other than that, conversations. I will often be talking with people just casually. And many times the question becomes, so what's happening with the stock market? They know the work that I do. And it'll lead into various types of conversation. So many of the clients that I have gotten, that's the method. I've just been having conversations. Sometimes it's because they're beneficiaries on someone else's financial investment. Sometimes it's because there's been the death, and now these are the inheritors. So there are a variety of ways that I've gotten new clients. But I'd say the most common is having conversations with people, and it works out.
Mhm. Is there a specific way you maximize the amount of conversations you can have? Going to events, being involved in philanthropy, specific hobbies, pickleball, perhaps?
Well, it's funny you mention that. The latter, yes. In my town, there is a pretty big group of people who play pickleball.
Mhm.
Uh, that is something I have picked up and enjoy a lot. So yes, there's one of the activities that I do. And
Yeah.
yes, I'm on a board with my local library. I also am in a group that focuses on my town's efforts to be inclusive. So I try to get out in the community. I belong to a boating club. There are just lots of ways that getting into conversations. My own firm in Rochester, we have 7 advisors in the firm, and we do events regularly. And that's a thing to invite people to.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. What is the boat club? I was in, Carefree Boat Club in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So
Yeah.
this is the Genesee Yacht Club, and
Ah.
it's a sailing club on Lake Ontario. Genesee River feeds into Lake Ontario.
Mhm.
And I joined this club a little over 8 years ago because I'm a big sailor. And
Oh, great.
this is a group of people that really love sailing, and we
Mhm.
really enjoy each other. And I've gotten several clients through the club.
Yeah. Nice. Um, you're aware I normally live in Barcelona, and we had the world, what was it called? The
America's Cup.
America's Cup, that's what right.
That's
And we
right.
had the America's Cup, a few months ago, and,
Chris, I think I mentioned to you in our previous conversation that I was in Barcelona for just
oh,
a
yeah,
few
yeah.
days,
Mhm.
and the America's Cup practices were occurring at that moment. And this is a delightful opportunity. I just happened with my wife and
Mm,
we were out on a catamaran, just a pleasure sail,
mhm,
and they were practicing out on
mm,
the water and
mhm.
watching those boats. I mean, these are sailboats that travel 50 miles an hour, which
That's
is just shocking.
crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
It is. It's amazing.
Yeah, so that is, I mean, if you enjoy sailing, that seems like a good, good niche to go after. I have a quick story. One of my good friends in Barcelona has a beautiful apartment right on the water,
Mhm.
wraparound, balcony. You could see the America's Cup, like, right from his balcony. And he subleased his apartment, for he spends, I think, $4,000 a month. He subleased it for that month of, October for $35,000.
What an opportunity.
I was like "Okay."
Right.
Talk about, having no price sensitivity here.
Well, I don't know if you've heard of this. The entry fee to get into the America's Cup is $2 million.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And that's the low end. That's the low end of what you got to spend. To build one of those boats, $50 million.
What? I had no idea it was that much. My
Yeah. And
goodness.
then you got to hire the crew. That's several million.
That is not for the faint of heart. That's for
Nope.
sure.
Nope. Not at all.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. Well, we are coming towards the end of our time. Paul, you have delivered in all levels. This has been great. My final question for you is an open-ended question. You can take it in any direction that you like. And that question is, what are you working towards?
Probably the first thing that I think about when I'm working towards is my wife being able to retire.
Hey,
So she asked me a few years ago when I was going to start this, she's like, okay, well, how long is it going to take till you make enough money so that I can quit?
like any good wife should have.
Yes. So there's a significant goal that we've got. And one of the big things is that I love about this job is that I really like the client conversations. So my goal is to get better at them.
Mhm.
Not to just have the same client meeting and a routine. Here I've got my checklist. Did I ask everything on the checklist? No, but I want to be good at the conversation where I'm getting even better at listening, better at asking these questions that will move the conversation in insightful ways, and learning how to help people get their wealth to work for them and reach the goals that they're really trying to uncover.
Mhm. Wow. That's incredible. You strike me as a constant tinkerer and improver and just 1% better every day or every week. So
Oh,
that
I would love 1% better every day or every week.
that would be
I
insane.
certainly hope for that. But even if I'm 0.5% better, that's still better. But yes, continuous improvement.
Yeah,
Really a
yeah.
mantra.
That's great. Yeah. So, awesome. Well, we'll be excited to continue to watch you on your journey, and thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise. I learned a ton, and I think we got some really incredible insights and strategies, and I just love I think back to like Socrates, and it's like, okay, this guy was brilliant, but he never told anyone anything. He just asked questions, and I was like, Paul is he's like a Socrates to me, man. He's just asking great questions to get people to realize the important things to better reach their goals. So that's awesome,
Thank
Paul.
you.
I
Appreciate that
I'm
comment.
I'm impressed with your journey as well. You understood what you wanted to do, and how you best enjoyed kind of living your life and interacting with people, and you were true to that path and true to yourself, and it's paying dividends. You just continue to do the things that are meaningful and impactful to you and to everyone, all of your clients that you serve. So that's awesome. You are who I hope shows up every interview that I have on this show. So you're awesome, Paul.
I appreciate your taking this time with me.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It truly is my pleasure. I enjoy it. I think as much or more than every guest that we have. So awesome. All right,
Right.
Paul, where can my audience find out more about you?
So Wisdom Rock Financial Group in Rochester, New York is my website. That's just Google Wisdom Rock Rochester, New York, and that's where you're going to find me. You probably could find me on an internet search, Paul Stack Financial Advisor. Also, if you go to Ameriprise, ameriprise.com, you'll see me if you search for an advisor there.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to link to all that in the show notes.
Thank you.
All right, Paul, thank you again so much for being a guest.
Okay.
Yeah, to all our listeners out, thank you so much for tuning in and keep on growing out there, everybody. See ya.